The Fall Guy is truly a love letter and a big thank you to all these stunt performers out there, and it's also a pretty fun and pretty good film, so let's talk about it. As always, this video will have spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, head over to my shorts, TikTok, or Instagram and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, let's talk about The Fall Guy. So this movie is directed by David Leitch, and it follows Ryan Gosling's character Colt Seavers, who is a stuntman in Hollywood. But once the actor that he performs stunts for goes missing off of his movie set, it's now up to him to find him and return him to the set so this movie can get made, all while trying to rekindle an old relationship with Emily Blunt's character, Jody Moreno, who is also the director of this movie. Starting things off with the good, and the first thing I have here is obviously Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling. They were easily the best part of the movie for me. They were great on screen together, they had amazing chemistry, and they were also pretty funny as well. And their relationship and charisma is really the thing that held this whole movie together. In my opinion, outside of the stunts and action in this film, when Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling were on screen together, that's when I thought this movie was truly at its best. I loved their banter back and forth. It was super entertaining for me, and it was just really easy to buy in and believe the relationship that they were having on screen. And that relationship was another high point for me in this movie, even though I do wish they gave it a little bit more attention than they did, but I will touch on that in just a second. But yes, Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt were great together. The chemistry was phenomenal, and they were just a lot of fun to watch on screen during this film. Next up for the good, I have the action and just all the stunts that were pulled off in this film. Now, it's no question that this is a love letter to all the stunt performers out there, and the action and the stunts that they pulled off in this thing were so big and grand and honestly just a blast to watch, but it also makes you really appreciate the work that stunt performers do. I mean, they literally had one scene which was right in the beginning of the movie where they did like 8.5 barrel rolls, I think it was, with a car, and that is a world record. So yes, they actually broke a world record while making this movie. Logan's good. There is truly no shortage of action and cool sequences in this film, especially in the second part. And I know I said Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling were the best part of this movie, but I have to put the stunts in action, right up there with it, because they were just awesome in this movie. But stunt performers truly don't get the credit that they deserve, and they even made a joke in this movie that stunt performers can't receive Oscars, which is just crazy to think about considering all the stuff they do, and they hopefully in the future will make an Oscar for stunt performing because they deserve it. So shout out to the director David Leitch, who is also a former stuntman and made the underrated movie Bullet Train, which I absolutely loved last year. So I guess at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is I shouldn't be surprised by the action and the stunts we got in this movie, given that it was made by David Leitch, who is a stuntman himself. And finally, for the good, I have the humor. Now, overall, the humor worked for me. Not all of the jokes and quips quite landed, but there was enough there for me to enjoy it. A lot of the humor obviously came from Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt going back and forth on screen together, but I also really enjoyed Winston Duke's character in this. It kind of felt like his character was only there to just quote old movies, but that's something I thought was super funny, given that obviously I'm kind of a movie nerd if you haven't guessed it already, and it was kind of fun to pick up on some of those callbacks when his character would reference an old movie. But they also had that little inside joke for Comic-Con fans on how they wanted to get this movie that they were making to preview at Hall H, and for those of you who don't know, Hall H is pretty much the hall at Comic-Con in San Diego where all the big stuff happens. You know, Marvel is there pretty much every year from my knowledge, but it's where all the big important stuff and important information is dropped and shown to fans for the first time. So it gets pretty hectic in there. And then they had that little scene at the end of the movie where they're actually in Hall H at Comic-Con showing the trailer. So just being a nerd and a Comic-Con fan, I just thought that was really funny and just a really cool little nugget in there and kind of added to my enjoyment of this film. So yeah, even though not all of the jokes landed for me, there were plenty of inside jokes within this movie that were kind of a if you know you know type thing, and being the nerd I am, I enjoyed those and it entertained me at the end of the day. Moving on to the so-so, and the first thing I have here I kind of briefly mentioned before, but I wish the relationship between Emily Blunt's character and Ryan Gosling's character was more of the main plot of the story. Now, this film was an action comedy slash rom-com slash tribute to all the stunt performers, and with Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling being the pretty much glue of this film and holding everything together, it just felt like they should have put a little bit more attention on the relationship that they had together on screen than they did. The main plot with Ryan Gosling trying to find Aaron Taylor Johnson's character just wasn't all that interesting to me until the twist happened later in the movie. And during a lot of those scenes where he was looking for Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, Ryan Gosling was on the screen by himself or without Emily Blunt. And don't get me wrong, he did great. He was super charismatic. He was funny during those scenes. No problem with Ryan Gosling being on screen by himself in this movie because he can handle that. He's awesome. But it was just better when Emily Blunt was there with him and they could bounce back and forth. And that's when I got most of my enjoyment out of this movie, as I said before, is when both of those two were on screen together, going back and forth, cracking jokes. And this film does start out by making it seem like the relationship is going to be one of the main things in this movie, but for me, it kind of got overshadowed by the main plot of this movie. And given that I wasn't so interested in the main plot until the twist happened, like pretty much right before the third act, I just wish we would have got a little bit more of that relationship because, again, that was one of the stronger parts of the movie for me. And finally, for the so-so, I have the third act. And even though I enjoyed the third act, it still kind of felt like an epilogue to the movie because after Colt Seavers or Ryan Gosling faked his death, the main plot was kind of concluded in a way. I mean, he found Tom Ryder and found out why he was missing and why all this was going on, and then he obviously had to escape him, and he escaped him by essentially faking his death, and now he was essentially free. So once we got past that part of the movie and we moved on into the third act, it was one of those things like, well, what now? Because we just concluded what this whole movie was kind of about. And the third act was essentially just getting Tom Ryder to confess what he did, and even though, yes, I'll admit it, I enjoyed the third act. I thought it was pretty good. It was a lot of fun, lots of action and big stunts that they pulled off. But at the end of the day, it just kind of felt like an add-on because I already felt like I got a conclusion right before it. And finally, getting into the bad, and the first thing I have here is that this movie did kind of get off to a slow start. And for me, I think that is because the main plot of this story wasn't really that interesting, as I said before, until we got the twists later in the movie with Colt Seavers being framed for the death of Tom Ryder's current stuntman. Before that happened, there was just a lot of scenes that were very heavy in dialogue, and we only got like a couple of action scenes right there in the first half of the movie. So the first half kind of felt a little slow compared to the second half because when everything was kind of revealed and we got that big twist in the second half of the movie, that's when things kind of got a little bit more fast-paced and we got those big action set pieces and stunts that we were expecting from this movie. But that slow start kind of leads me into my next thing for the bad, and that is that this movie kind of felt longer than it needed to be. As I said before, the third act kind of felt like an add-on for me because the main story was resolved right before that, and then you add that on with the slow start and some of the more heavier dialogue scenes in the first half of that movie before we get to the fast-paced action of the second, and it just felt like this thing was more prolonged than it really needed to be. And I think if they would have gotten to that twist in action of the second half of the movie a little bit quicker than they did, then I think this film wouldn't have felt as long as it did for me, and I probably would have been a little bit more interested in the main plot of the story because it progressed a little bit faster. But all in all, I enjoyed my time with this movie. Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt were the glue that held everything together. It had great action and it pays tribute to all the stunt performers out there. It's not a movie that's gonna blow you away, but it is a movie that you're going to have a lot of fun watching. Those are my thoughts on The Fall Guy. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.